How is everybody this morning? Isn't it just so cold in here? No, it's not. It's hot. It's humid. I'll try my best not to keep you too long, but I can't make any promises. So I just hope you guys can stick with me, because I know this type of weather is that weather just makes you get all comfortable in your seat, and then you just slowly start to, and then I might see that a couple, and I might call you out. So I'm going to make you a little bit afraid to even doze off a little bit, because I might call you out. But I want to jump in real quick, and before I do, I realize something that I do every time I preach. And maybe you guys are probably expecting it. If you've heard me preach before, you probably expect it. If not, you might not even notice, because maybe you don't listen to this part. But I've realized that every time I speak, I come up here for some reason and tell you about the whole process of me being approached to preach on this day, and how the process of me being preparing to preach and how that goes. Why do I do that? I have no idea why I tell you. I just feel like for some reason I need to tell you, and guess what? Today is no different. I feel like I need to tell you what happened, but to be honest, I think it's a little bit more relevant today that I tell you how this went down. So, a couple of weeks ago, Pastor Keith approached me, and he asked me to preach on this day, right? He told me right off the bat, because usually when I have to preach, it's because he's not here. He's not going to be here, and so he needs somebody to cover. He said, no, I'm going to be there. I'm just going to be away during the week. And I'm going to be away with Noah. We're going to go away. I have a good time. And it would be a blessing if you could preach, and then I won't have to be distracted during that time with him to prepare for Sunday. And so my obvious response was absolutely not. No, I'm just joking. I didn't say that. Obviously, I said yes. That's why I'm here right now. So I said, oh, okay, no problem. And so then he goes and tells me, well, Joe's going to speak the week before, and then the week before that, I'm going to finish up my series. So in other words, that means I can either, one, correlate with Joe, and we can maybe do like a tag team 2-week mini series, or I'll just speak on whatever God's putting on your heart to speak. And so I want to be honest with you about something. I'm the type of person, I don't know if Pastor Keith will agree, I don't know if Joe will agree. I'm the type of person that if I was told and approached, hey, I want you to preach, we're doing a series, a 3-week series on A, B, and C. I want you to preach third week on C. I think to me, that's usually pretty easy at that point. You're like, all right, cool, I'm going in. I already know the topic. It's already taken a major step out of the process. I already know the topics, and now I just know that I got to study on that, and I got to pray that God would put something on my heart in regarding that. But that's not the case for this week. And so as I prepared and I prayed, God, put something on my heart. What do you want me to share? What do you want me to say? I'll be honest, I started to stress out a lot. This is usually common for me. When I have to preach on a Sunday morning, I stress out. But it's not because I'm worried to come up here and preach in front of you guys and talk. We all know that's not the case, right? If you know me at all, you know I have no problem speaking or talking. And if you don't know me, just ask any of my youth. They'll tell you I talk a lot. So that's not the issue. I mean, there's always those butterflies that anybody gets when they're public speaking, sure. But that's not the reason why I stress out. I stress out because I start to worry about what if I miss God's heart for what he wants me to share. I mean, this platform to me, this is huge, right? I'm called to youth, and it's a slightly different platform, but this platform, Sunday morning, the main service, right? That's big, that's huge. And so I get nervous that I'm going to miss God's heart, and I'm not going to say what he wants me to say, right? And so as I was stressing out and I was really getting worried, I'm thinking to myself, am I going to miss God's heart, right? Or I start worrying about what if I don't have enough time to get ready, right? Because I work full time. I have a job that my hours can be crazy and it's all kinds of stuff like that. What if I don't have enough time to truly prepare? And as a result, I come up here and not really ready and just kind of get in the way of what God's trying to do. Right? So I start stressing out about that. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking these things are going through my mind. And as I stress out and worry about that, I start thinking about things like, well, you know what? I'm also not the most intelligent person, right? Some of you might think I'm pretty intelligent. Some of you might be like, yeah, you're right. You're really not the most intelligent person. I sometimes think I'm not the most intelligent person, so I worry. I start to worry. I'm like, all right, what if in my preparation I misunderstand something? I read something, I study something, I'm praying, and I misunderstand something, and as a result, I come here on Sunday morning, I preach that as truth, but it's not, and I mislead you as a result. I start questioning myself. And as a result of this worry and this stress, I start even thinking, man, maybe I shouldn't be the one preaching. Like, I think Pastor Keith should ask somebody else. Maybe there's a better qualified individual to be up here on Sunday morning, and it's not me. I start to doubt myself. I doubt what potentially God is calling me to do in this moment. I start to think, I'm not qualified for this. I have tons of weakness. I even doubt myself to the point that I'm like, you know what? I'm not perfect. No one in this room is perfect. But I know I'm not perfect, and I realize there's so much more that God needs to do in me. How can I come up here, give a word that I feel he's leading me to give, when that word is something I so desperately need to work on? How am I qualified to give that? Shouldn't somebody that's got it together, shouldn't somebody that's not struggling with that or working through this, shouldn't they be the one? And these kind of thoughts start going in my mind. And that's what happened these past couple weeks as I was getting ready. And so I started making excuses in my mind. I'm like, oh, you should talk to Pastor Keith. Like, no, you can't do this. No, somebody else got to do this. You can't do it. I'm like, what if you go up there and you just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk too much and then totally get in the way, right? And so I get making these excuses. But as I thought about these excuses, as I was working through these things in my mind in preparation, I came to a realization that isn't this something that we all kind of do at some point in time? Right? We all do this when we're approached to do something that's maybe out of our comfort zone. Right? We tend to do this as people. And I'm not talking about preaching on a Sunday morning, because obviously in this room, many of you might never have that opportunity. But I'm talking about even if somebody at your workplace comes up to you and goes, hey, I really have an opportunity I want you to get involved with. Would you be willing to do this? And you're like, in your mind, you don't want to say no right away, and you're like, I don't know. That's not what I do. I do this. I don't do that. And you start stressing out. You start getting worried. And you're like, I can't do this. I'm not qualified for the task. I mean, even here in church, you might be approached, hey, do you want to volunteer for children? Children, I can't handle children. I don't know. Children, I don't have patience for children. No, I can't do that. How am I going to do this? I'm not qualified for the job. And we start making up these excuses of why we are not qualified, why we're too weak, why we don't have the necessary things to do what we're being tasked to do. Is it just me? Does anybody else have done that before? Right? That's like the more natural realm thing. Sometimes we do this even with God. I think a lot of times we do this with God, if not most of the times. Right? We're praying. Or just maybe random. We're at the store. We see somebody struggling with something, and God just nudges our heart. I want you to go speak to that person. I need you to go share them the gospel. Tell them about me. And in that moment, we're like, nope, not good at speaking. Nope, I don't even know that person. Why are they going to listen? No, they're not going to listen to me. I'm nervous. No, I can't do this. Here in the store, they're trying to shop. I'm trying to shop. We need to shop. I need to go. I got things to do. I can't do this, God. You got to ask somebody else. There's got to be somebody in the other aisle that can talk to them. Please, God, not me. Right? We get stressed. We do that when God nudges us to do something and he calls us to do something. And as I thought of this, it reminded me of a story in the Bible that a lot of us are familiar with. And I feel like this is where God is leading our conversation. And so you could put the title screen up. I just came up with the title kind of last minute, but this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to be talking about qualifying inadequacies, right? And you can probably tell by the image the story that we're going to talk about. The story that I was reminded of when I started worrying, when I started doubting, when I started questioning, when I started making excuses as why I should not be the one up here, I was reminded of Moses' burning bush experience, right? A lot of us are familiar with that story. And just in case you're not familiar with that story, I'm going to do a quick summary before we jump into that portion of all the events that has happened up to this point with Moses. So Moses was a Hebrew, born in Egypt during a time when the Hebrew people in Egypt were enslaved by the Egyptians, right? He was born during this time, but not just any time either. During this time, the current Pharaoh that was alive at that time was becoming very fearful of the Hebrew slaves. He was fearful because their ever-increasing numbers, their families were growing. They were prospering. They kept on growing. Even though they were slaves, even though they were their workforce, they kept on growing. And so they became fearful of their numbers, fearful of what they could potentially do. And so out of a response of that fear, the Pharaoh decided, I'll take action into my own hands. I know what I'll do. I'm going to kill off all the newborn baby boys and those that are about 1 to 2 years old. And so that's what he did. He had his men go out throughout the nation of Egypt, killing all the Hebrew boys that were 2 and younger. Moses was born during this time. And so like any mother, good mother would do, Moses' mother tried her best to do something that would protect Moses, right? And so she hid Moses. She hid when they would come looking. And she hid Moses as long as she could possibly do it, until it became too difficult to hide him inside their own home and things like that. So she decided what she would do, and she would take Moses, she would put him in a basket and hide him in the reeds of the Nile River. He was not there long until being discovered and found by Pharaoh's daughter. Now, Pharaoh found Moses. Knowing it's an infant baby and knowing that it was a Hebrew baby, she thought it was a cute, beautiful, handsome baby. And she decided to take Moses in as her own. Funny thing is, though, she wasn't able to nurse Moses. And so this is one part of the story I need to add because I think it's pretty dope how God does things. And I know I just said dope on stage, but go with me. She goes and sends somebody to go find a woman that will be able to nurse Moses. The woman she finds is Moses' mother. And she actually pays Moses' mother to nurse her own child. She didn't know it was her child, but she paid her to nurse the child and take care of him while he was an infant. Isn't God cool? Like how God does stuff like that? She was able to protect and then also get paid to do it at the same time. It was pretty awesome. So she is taking care of, and once Moses weaned off of nursing, Moses then was given back to Pharaoh's daughter and raised in royalty. Not like the rest of the Hebrews that were enslaved and forced to work. He was raised in royalty in the court of Pharaoh, and that's where our story is getting to that point. So he gets older, right? He goes out, he's walking about, he comes across a Hebrew man being beaten by a slave driver. He looks around, sees nobody else around, and so he decides to take matters in his own hands, and he kills the Egyptian man to protect the Hebrew. He tries to cover up what he did. He hides the body, and he thinks, okay, everything will be good, I'll be fine. The following day, however, he finds out that he did not do a good job. He is called out on what he did by another Hebrew man. In that very moment, Moses becomes fearful because he realizes what I did is not hidden. What I did is known, and if the Egyptians find out, they're going to want to kill me, and that is exactly what happened. The Egyptians found out, Pharaoh found out, and he wanted Moses dead for what he did. And so Moses ran in fear. He ran through the desert, ran towards Midian, right outside of Egypt. And he finally gets there. He escapes with his life. And he comes across a well, and there is a few sisters at the well trying to draw some water. And they're being harassed by some local shepherds. And so he stands in and protects them, or gets the shepherds to leave. The sisters go back to their father, priest in Midian, and tell him what had happened. He calls for Moses to come back, and if being so happy for what he did, he gives his oldest daughter to Moses in marriage and offers Moses the opportunity to live with them and to work for them. And so Moses accepts, he gets married, and he works for his father-in-law as a herder for 40 years. And that brings us to our story where we are right now. And I'm going to read it in its entirety because I feel like it's important for the point that I'm going to try to make. So the reference can be on the screen if you want to open it up and follow along. I won't put the verses up because it's a good portion. So I'm reading from the NIV, by the way. So now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to a far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go and see this strange sight. Why does this bush not burn up? When the Lord saw that Moses had come over to see, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And with this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt, and I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. I am concerned about their suffering, so I have come down to rescue them. from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And the Egyptians are oppressing, And now the cries of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said, God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, bringing the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, suppose I go to Israel, to the Israelites, and say to them that the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. Go, assemble the elders of Israel, and say to them, the Lord, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, I've watched over the years and have seen what has been done to you in Egypt. And I have promised to bring you up out of your misery, out of Egypt, into the land of the Canaanites, a land flowing with milk and honey. The elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to them, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the wilderness to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all the wonders that I have performed among them. After that, he will let you go. And I will make the Egyptians favorably disposed upon this people, so that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. Every woman is to ask her neighbor and any woman living in her house for articles of silver, gold, and clothing, which you will put on your sons and daughters, and so you will plunder the Egyptians. Moses answered, what if they do not believe me or listen to what I say? The Lord did not appear to you. What if they say that? Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. The Lord said, throw it on the ground. Moses threw the staff on the ground, and it became a snake, and he ran from it. Then the Lord said to him, reach out and grab by your hand and take it by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake and turned it back into a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent you. Then the Lord said, put your hand inside your cloak. So Moses put his hand in his cloak. When he took it out, his skin was leprous. It became white as snow. Now put it back into your cloak, he said. So Moses put his hand back in his cloak, and when he took it out, it was restored like the rest of his flesh. Then the Lord said, if they do not believe or pay attention to the first sign, they may believe the second. But if they do not believe these 2 signs or listen to you, take some water from the Nile, pour it on the ground. The water that you take from the river will become blood on the ground. Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes the deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak, and I will teach you what to say. But Moses said, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. Then the Lord's anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He's already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I will help both of you speak, and I will teach you what to do. He will speak to the people for you. It will be as if he's your mouth and you were God to him. But take this staff in your hand so that you can perform the signs with it. Now, I know that's a big portion to read, and I'm glad if you're still awake. But I feel like it was important and necessary to read that in its entirety. Because I wanted to know while I read, if you were able to pick up any of the excuses Moses was making as to why he was the wrong guy and why God should have picked somebody else. When I read this, I get 5 different excuses from Moses. And I just want to go through them real quick. First excuse, you'll see it up on the TV. I am not important enough. We see this in verse 11, chapter 3, verse 11. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt. This is a legitimate, excuse. I mean, I think I would make that excuse too. Moses is probably thinking in that moment, I literally ran away from that place 40 years ago because they wanted to kill me. Why me? Why would the Israelites even listen to me? I'm not important. Why would they listen to me? They don't even know me from anybody else. I didn't grow up with them. I didn't do anything with them. They don't know me. Why would they listen to me? Why would Pharaoh even take a moment in his day to allow me, a nobody, to come and speak to him? Who am I? I'm not important. And that would be a legitimate reason, right? That'd be like God telling us, I want you to go and speak to the President of the United States of America face to face. Go right through the White House. I'm going to make a way. We'll be like, no. I'm not even going to attempt to go through the gates because I probably won't make it past that. We would be worried, we would be afraid. And this is a little bit more so, because I would assume that the President of the United States is a little bit more forgiving than Pharaoh would be, in those times especially. And so Moses is like, I'm not important enough. Why me? No, excuse number one. And so God responds to that excuse. And he says, it doesn't matter how important, pretty much. I'm going to paraphrase it in my way. The way I see it is, it doesn't matter how important you think you are. What matters is who's calling you. I didn't call you so you can go on your own. I called you and I will be with you. So if I called you, it will happen. Don't worry about how important you feel that you're not. Just know that I'm with you. Second excuse that Moses makes. I don't know what to say. What shall I say? We see this in verse 13 of chapter 3. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I say? Another good excuse, right? Once again, we just found out from this story that Moses, for the past 40 years, was a herder. That's what he did. He worked for his father-in-law, herding animals, herding whatever it was, cattle, whatever it may be. That's what he did. He wasn't a public speaker. He wasn't a prophet that God used in the past to speak to other people, especially those in authority. This isn't something he did. This is totally outside his comfort zone. He would have no clue what to do. He didn't have some kind of training by God. All right, let me give you a 3-week training and then you'll go. No, he's being told on the spot, this is what I want you to go do. And Moses is like, I don't even know what to say. I don't even really know you that well. What will I do? What will I say? Another good excuse. But God responds to that excuse right away and tells him exactly what to say. That big portion of that scripture was God telling him, okay, fine, good excuse. Here, say this. In other words, repeat after me. I will give you the words to say. You don't have to be 100% prepared. I will tell you. I will be with you. I will teach you what to say. And so, Moses, after that response from God, Moses is like, okay, another excuse. Here's another excuse. They won't listen to me. Why would they listen to me? Why would the Israelites listen to me? Right? Once again, like I said before, good excuse. Why would the Israelites listen to Moses? Sure, he's a Hebrew. Sure, he's technically an Israelite too. But he hasn't suffered like they did. He never once went through what they were going through. He lived in royalty, raised in royalty, had life easy up to the point where he decided to commit a murder and run for his life. Why would they listen to him? There's no reason for them to listen to him. And so God's response to that is understandable, once again. He understands, okay, legitimate excuse. I get what you're saying. I will prepare you, though. Take that staff in your hand. I'm going to give you the ability to do wonders and signs that clearly you cannot do on your own. That the moment you do this in front of them, they will not be able to deny the fact that I am with you and I have sent you. So he gave him what he needed to do what he was being called to do. At this point, I kind of see Moses as getting a little desperate. Now he's like, oh my goodness, every time I give an answer, he has something back to give me. I can't get out of this. So now I feel like Moses at this point starts kind of going inward. He attacks something of himself that's out of his control. And so he makes his fourth excuse. God, I'm not a good speaker. We see this in chapter 4, verse 10. Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow in speech and tongue. This is his desperate plea. He has a weakness. He has a speech impediment. Many scholars and commentators, even Hebrew scholars and commentators, the majority will say that he actually had a speech impediment which they believe to be a stutter. And if this fact is true, if he did in fact have a stutter, they know for a fact he had some kind of form of speech impediment. The belief overall is a stutter. But that would be a legitimate excuse. God, you're telling me to go talk to people, and I can't even physically talk well in general. Like, I really think you might have overlooked that little thing, God, and I'm thinking you're making a mistake. There's got to be somebody else. He starts attacking his own weakness, saying, God, I can't do this. I literally, physically cannot do what you're asking me to do. And I love God's response in this because it's a total God response. Like, he's like, all right, real quick, stop with your excuses. Let me remind you who I am. Because I'm pretty sure I'm the one that made you. I'm pretty sure I did not overlook that when I called you. It wasn't something I misseen or totally forgot about. Like, it's not like God was like, oh man, I didn't realize you stuttered. Oh, that is an issue. I'm going to go find somebody else. Sorry, I'll burn a different bush somewhere else. Like, no, he's like, I created you. Who made the mute? I did. Who gave them a tongue? Who allows people to speak? I do. I made you exactly as you are. And guess what? I didn't make a mistake, and I'm not making a mistake now calling you. And so you can't really combat that response. And I think in this very moment, Moses realized there's nothing I'm going to say that's really going to work in my favor. And so he goes with his final excuse, which is more of a cop-out, and he just flat out says it, please send someone else. Please send someone else. We see this in verse 13. But Moses said, pardon your servant, Lord, please send someone else. Finally, Moses gave up. He's like, here's my last excuse. I just don't want to do it. I'm not prepared to do it. I don't feel comfortable. It's really outside of my comfort zone. I do a really good job herding. I'm like the best at it. Like, you should see me. I'm a pro. I really don't want to go there. I have a great life here. I'm married. I got kids. Things are great. Things are good. My life. I have my life. That's what's important. If I go there, I might not have my life. Pharaoh might take my life. I like it here. I don't want to go. Send someone else. And still, God comes back with a response. God was determined that he was going to use Moses. He wanted to use Moses. He had a purpose and a plan for Moses, and it was this. And so even with the excuses, he still had a response, even with this. But he was frustrated, which is awesome to know. God can be frustrated at us sometimes. We can easily get to that point where we frustrate God. And God was frustrated at Moses. And finally, not that he gave in, but he said, okay, I see the need. I see what you're talking about. I see your excuses. I see the issues you're having. I will send somebody with you. I will be with you, and I will send somebody with you. I will send your brother. He's good at speech, so you don't even have the excuses there, but you are still going to go. Because you are going to perform the wonders. And you are the one that's going to relay what I say to you to him. Because you are still going to be my mouthpiece. But I will help you. I will send somebody that will help alongside of you. And so excuse after excuse after excuse, finally Moses decided to trust God and do what he had asked and promised that he would do. And so we know based off of these scriptures, if we were to read on, and don't worry, I'm not going to read the rest of Exodus for you, because I know my voice can be monotone and it would be very boring. But we know based off of the rest of what we see in Exodus, God not only accomplished what he said he was going to accomplish through Moses in the task that he had given him at the burning bush experience, but he did so much more in and through Moses. Things that Moses wasn't even probably thinking about in that moment. Maybe he even thought, all right, I'll do this, and then if my hands are clean, I'm good. Once I get them out, then it's God's problem, and I can dip. I can go back with my cattle. But God used him to do some pretty amazing things. He ultimately became the leader of Israel during that whole wilderness experience. He was the one that had the opportunity to go on the top of Mount Sinai, to receive the 10 Commandments from God, to be in the physical presence of the Lord, and to give those commandments to his chosen people. Moses got to do things way beyond what he thought about in that very moment, because he stepped out and trusted, even though he knew he was not qualified. And he had all the excuses in the book that were justifiable. But another thing that's awesome about this particular story, is that this is not the one and only example of this in the Bible. All right? If you read the Bible from Genesis to Revelations all the way through, you will find countless accounts of individuals being used by God that were clearly not qualified for the task they're giving, had tons of weaknesses, struggled, and were littered with issues. And yet God used these individuals. I want to give 5 quick examples. They're not going to be on the screen, so just follow. It's real quick examples of just a few of the people God chose to use. Abraham and Sarah. God promised them that he would make them the patriarchal parents of the nation of Israel, his chosen people. Okay, doesn't sound too difficult. But what's crazy about it is he made that promise when they were old. Like, really old. Like, not able to have children, and yet somehow they're going to have children and become the nations that are more numerous than the stars in the sky and the sands on the seashore. That seemed like he might have maybe asked the most unqualified people in that moment. And they probably thought so too. But he made a promise, and they trusted, and that promise came through. David, right, greatest king that Israel ever had, was anointed as king as a teenage shepherd boy. Will any of you anoint any teenager that you know as a king for you? Probably not. Let alone a shepherd boy, which was kind of like a lowly kind of job to do. It wasn't even like he was some like royalty, famous teenager kid that had like an awesome family heritage that he was going to like take over. No, teenage shepherd boy, anointed to be future king. And not even that, when he became king, come on, how many issues did David have? He's known as the greatest king, but yet he was a murderer, an adulterer, and often questioned God and doubted. And yet God used him because he would trust and still continue to do what God called him to do. Jonah. It's a good person with some faults right there. Jonah was a prophet. I'm not going to sing the song from VeggieTales, but Jonah was a prophet, and he was constantly used by God multiple times until one day God asked him to do something that he did not want to do. Not because he was afraid, but because he knew exactly what God was going to do, and he was not going to be okay with it. And so he decided, I will do the complete opposite of what you said and go the complete opposite direction, and I will physically run away from you. And God chased him down and said, no, you're going to do this. And through a series of events that we all know, are familiar with, he brought him back, and he did what God told him to do, and God accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. And a nation repented for the sins because he answered God's call. Peter, the lead apostle, the disciple that always put his foot in his mouth, right? The lead apostle. After Jesus died, resurrected, and ascended into heaven, Peter became that kind of the leader of the first century church. What were his qualifications? He was a fisherman, had no theological training or teaching, and even just shortly before leading the church, he denied Christ 3 times in the same night that he was arrested and put on false trial. And yet God chose him to be the leader of the church, the lead apostle, right? What was his qualifications? And then finally, one of the biggest ones, in my opinion, Paul, the Apostle Paul, the chief theologian of the apostles, the chief apologist, the chief missionary, the man that is responsible for the majority of our New Testament, the man that is responsible for the majority of the doctrines that we follow in the modern day and age church. We get from his writings, from his teachings. The same man responsible for almost single-handedly, with the help of some others, yes, spreading the gospel around the known world at the time. That was what he was tasked to do. And yet he was the most zealous and greatest persecutor of the Christian church before his conversion. He was responsible for the death of many believers. He was present for some, held the cloaks for those who stoned Stephen to death as he cheered them on doing it. And yet God used him to be the chief theologian, the chief apologist, the chief missionary in the church, of the first century church. It's as if our inadequacies are the qualifying qualities that God looks for. Every example we see in the Bible, this is the truth that I get. And it's like what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1:27. He says this, but God chose the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. God chose the weak things of the world to shame the strong. That's how God works. Right? I've heard this saying, and I didn't actually have it in my notes, but this is something that when I was at Bible college, a lot of times certain teachers would say this a lot, because obviously at Bible college, you're studying to be a minister at some point in your life, whether it be a lead pastor, youth pastor, children's pastor, missionary, whatever it is, and it can become stressful. The work is hard. It's difficult. And then I think almost everybody that goes to Bible college will at some point. I had my moment in Bible college. I shared it before, where you will literally question everything you're doing and be like, did I miss something here? I don't think I am actually supposed to be here. And when we were there, one thing that we would hear a lot is God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. You get that? God doesn't call those who are equipped. He equips those who are called. It's as if our inadequacies, our weaknesses, our failings, those are the qualities that God can use the most within us. And so God didn't make a mistake when he calls you to do something that maybe you don't feel qualified for. It's actually the exact opposite. God called you and challenges you and leads you to do things that you are not qualified, because that is exactly what qualifies you to do so. Now, I know the example I used of Moses might seem extreme for you. You might be like, well, obviously God's going to equip Moses with the task that he was giving him. He was giving him a task that nobody could do. He had all the legitimate reasons. Of course, God was going to equip him and help him. But this is different. God just asked me to go share the gospel with somebody. Like, that's a simple task, right? It's not that important compared to what Moses did. So is he just expecting me to be able to do that myself? I'm nervous. I can't do that. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if they, look at me funny and I don't know what to say? Or what if I stumble on my words? That's not the same thing as what Moses did. But the fact is, it is the same thing as what Moses did. Because there is nothing that we can do, there is nothing that God can cause us to do that we can do on our own. Nothing. No matter how small it may seem, we physically cannot do it if God's not part of it and not helping. Right? When God calls us to love our neighbor, we can't even do that without God's help. Have any of you tried to love somebody without God's help? It is sometimes easy depending on the person. Some people make it so difficult to love them. And without God loving us first and filling us up with his love, it's going to be impossible to love our neighbor, especially if that neighbor wants nothing to do with us. We need God for something as little as that. What about sharing the gospel with somebody? Sharing the gospel, hear me through, will be absolutely pointless and do nothing if God doesn't move on behalf of that gospel being shared. If he doesn't move in the heart of the person to receive it, the gospel will just fall on deaf ears and nothing would happen. God has to be part of it all. Only God can do what only God can do. And everything he calls us to do is only things that he can do, but he partners with us to do it. I'm coming close to my close real quick. I kind of want to close on a quote of something I came across when I was reading. But before I read it real quick, the point I'm trying to get here is that I know that many in this room, and even if you don't believe it, have a purpose, that God has a plan for you. There are things that he wants to do in you and through you, and you're not going to be qualified to do it. You're going to have weaknesses that seem to get in the way. You're going to have thoughts in your mind that tell you that you cannot do it, and sometimes those things are going to be good excuses. But I can promise you that's exactly where you need to be. Because it's exactly that at that point that you realize how much you need God. And that's the only way we'll ever accomplish anything. And so I came across this portion in my studies as I was preparing. And I just think what this guy says kind of just it challenged me and encouraged me, and it kind of hits the point I'm trying to make right on the head. And so I want to share this before I close. Pesky, you bring it up, and I'll read it. If we do not feel inadequacies for whatever assignment God gives us, we're not in touch with reality. For when it comes to doing anything that is intended to display God's glory, advance God's kingdom, proclaim his word to a resistant world, win and save the lost people, shepherd souls, battle demonic powers, and mortify the persistent indwelling sin, who in the world is sufficient to do these things? It's not a question that the person is legitimately asking. This is a rhetorical question. The answer is nobody. None of us can do any of these things that were just listed without God. He calls us to do it knowing that we cannot do it on our own so that he can be glorified within us. And so I don't know where you're at today. I don't know who in this room needed to hear that. I pray and believe that somebody did, because I don't feel like God puts a word on somebody's heart for no reason. I know I was challenged by it, and if I was the only one that needed it, well, praise be God, all glory to him, because I was challenged. Because there's so many times I doubt myself, and there's so many times I think, I'm like, man, I am not qualified to do the things that I've been asked to do. And yet I got to be reminded that that's exactly what qualifies me to do exactly what I was asked to do. And so I don't know what God might be tugging on your heart to do. I don't know if there's a conversation between you and God that you've been having recently, and he's been nudging you, and you're like, not today. Nope. No, I can't do that, Jesus. Nope, can't do it. I'm hoping, and I challenge you to go back to that conversation with him. Go back with the understanding that you are not qualified, but he will fulfill the promises he promised. He will help you through whatever it is he's calling you. Approach that thing he's asking you to do. Take a step in faith and trust in him. It's the only way we can overcome our inadequacies, is trusting in God to do what we cannot do. And so I don't have like a legitimate way of ending service today, other than the fact that I just want to take a time for you guys to be able to reflect. Have a conversation with God right now. Maybe you need to be reminded of something that he tried to call you to do, and he's been patiently waiting for you to answer. Maybe some of you are dealing with it right now. Maybe some of you have been going back and forth with God, and he is pushing you to do something that's actually pretty big, and you are worried, and you are stressed, and you might have legitimate excuses, but trust me. Trust him. He's going to make it work. He always does. He always comes back 100-fold. And so we're going to put on a little bit of music, and you kind of work at your own pace. Have time with God. Talk to him. Be challenged. Be encouraged. And then we get to go out and do whatever it is that he's calling us to do. I'm going to close out in prayer real quick. Lord, I just want to thank you for this day. God, as always, I thank you for the opportunities that you've given us. Opportunities you've given me, even to be up here, a person who's completely unqualified, full of weaknesses, and desperately needs so much more done in my life for you. And yet you can use me, just like you can use every single person in this room. No matter where they're at, no matter what they're going through, no matter how they think of themselves, you still can use them. So God, I pray that you are moving and tugging on hearts today. God, that you are calling people in this room to do things that are going to make a difference in this world and for your kingdom, God. And that they will trust, knowing that what we see in Scripture is true. They will trust that you will always come through and help them. They need help and give them what they lack. God, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you in advance for potential testimonies that we may hear as a result of people that were challenged today, went out and did something, and you moved. Testimonies of lives coming to Jesus because the gospel was shared when it was previously afraid to be shared. Conversations had when before it was afraid to have those conversations. I thank you for these testimonies that are going to come. And God, I just pray that you continue to work in each and every one of our hearts. Continue to be with us today. Continue to move and stir this within us throughout this week, throughout this month, throughout this year. Just work within us, challenging us to step out in faith and do what you've called us to do. God, we love you. We thank you. We praise you for all the things that you have done, you're doing, and you plan to do. In your name we pray.